Thank you for tuning in to watch the 10th anniversary launch of our Invest Miami report. You're about to watch panel number 3, Empowering Entrepreneurs, how Miami is staying ahead of the competition in fostering a dynamic and sustainable startup environment. Be sure to like and subscribe for more leadership and business insights. Enjoy!
All right, good morning, everybody. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Navish Chawla. I'm the Chief Investment Officer for Hernandez Development and Construction. And before I start, I just wanted to say a few words. I was invited. I want to thank CAA and Abby. It's a big deal to be in business for 10 years. Our firm actually has been based in Coral Gables and Fort Lauderdale for about 23 years, founded by Alex Hernandez. So we know what it means to be in the community. As a firm, we have evolved into a vertically integrated developer and contractor. So not only do we source the land, we entitle, we design, we develop, and we construct. And over the last 23 years, we built about 17 million square feet, which makes us one of the largest industrial developer contractors, not only in South Miami, but in Florida. As a firm, we've just recently finished about 1.5 million square feet in Miami Gardens, 500,000 square feet in Opa-locka, almost 2 million square feet in Doral, and we have about another 2 million square feet in the pipeline that we're actively pursuing as a company. So what we've seen in the past 5 years, which was national tenants, Fortune 500 companies coming to Miami, we're seeing more and more growth by middle market companies and mom and pops. And so today we focus more on building industrial product that caters to this, the smaller spaces, the businesses that are driving the growth in Miami. What people don't recognize in Miami is that, and we've been actively involved looking at data centers, which is a big part of the technology that's happening in Miami, is that as a market, Miami is building, 5 million square feet of industrial, which is a lot of product. But we're leasing up, 4 to 6 million square foot. So it could tell you how strong the market is. In fact, it's only one of the few markets in the country that is still the darling of spec development, which is rare to say, because demand continues to grow, not only by the trends in kind of migration across the United States, but also businesses, the hub, technology, logistics, pharmaceuticals, financial services. That's what's driving a lot of the growth in the market today. And one of the things that we're just very proud to be a part, not only of the market's growth, and watched it kind of mature into a real institutional market, but helping small businesses, helping tenants that have approached us, finding space for them to not only grow their businesses, but also be an active member in the community. And so, again, I wanted to thank just CAA for allowing me to speak. We've been proud to be a sponsor, and we're around here to answer any questions, but also very proud to be part of the growth of Miami.
Thank you very much. By the way, my raffle ticket ends with 724, just so keep that in mind, yeah. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, CAA, for having us up here. Thank you for all the sponsors. It's really been a very interesting and enlightening event. I think we have about 3 hours, right? That's our panel. So by way of introduction, my name is Francis Rodríguez. I'm the chairman of the executive committee of Schutz & Bowen, law firm based here in Miami. We're a statewide firm. We're celebrating our 115th anniversary this year. So we were founded in 1910. Thank you. Frank Schutz, the founder of our firm, moved down here from Indiana, just like many people have moved down here in the past century. He started representing Henry Flagler on a matter. Henry Flagler was a creditor in a local newspaper, and Frank Schutz said, hey, Hank, I'll buy that from you, and he did, and that newspaper became the Miami Herald. So Frank Schutz was also the founder of the Miami Herald. I'd like to start off with a little discussion about Florida generally. Some things that people might not realize is that Florida is now the third largest state in the nation via population. It's also the 16th largest economy in the world by GDP. So Florida, if Florida was a country, it would be in the top 16. Miami-Dade County is the 6th largest metropolitan area in the country currently, with a population of 6.4 million people. So we're a transportation hub, a healthcare hub, and an educational hub. So with that, part of the panel is to talk about a little bit about the past, the current, and the future. And so I'll go off with some of the talking points. Miami has been long established as a real estate and tourism hub, but is now one of the most watched startup ecosystems in the country. From fintech, healthcare, logistics, consumer brands, founders are choosing South Florida not just for lifestyle, but for opportunity. But building a lasting innovation economy takes more than headlines, requiring access to capital, a strong talent pipeline, support infrastructure, and a collaborative ecosystem. In our final panel of this morning, I'm excited to explore those themes with 3 panelists who each bring a different but critical perspective to the conversation. And then instead of introducing you, I'm just going to allow you to introduce yourself. So, we'll start with Zahir.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Zahir. I moved in 2019 from New York. Had a unicorn, exited that in 2020. So I moved for many of the reasons other people moved, so beaches and taxes. And now I am a professor at University of Miami's Herbert Business School, and I run the entrepreneurship program there.
My name is Paul Gabriel. I'm a tax partner at Eisner Amper in our technology and life science practice. Born and raised in Florida, so kind of proud of that. But we're really glad to see everyone moving to Florida and the diverse talent pool that's really growing here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on the panel. I was also born and raised. We do exist. There's very few of us. I also went to school here. I am on week 4 as a head of commercial banking at City National Bank. I was with Truist prior to that for 17 years, and just excited to be here with you this morning.
Thank you all. I'm also born and raised, so there's at least 3 of us. What do you believe that makes Miami a startup environment unique compared to other innovation hubs? And we'll start with Zahir.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I do think that it ends up attracting a lot of people like me. So people who ended up coming down here because of an exit, and as a result, ends up having people who are ready to build their second, third, or fourth companies. And I think, just the heuristics for success after your first exit just end up increasing as you know the efficiencies, know the better way to play the game, know how to build a business. And so I think startups can become a lot more stable, especially from repeat founders, which we have a lot here, versus if you look at New York or SF and you have a lot of first-time founder-based companies, it's pretty, there's a lot of turmoil, lots of ups and downs, and there's a lot less stability knowing whether a startup is going to take off or not. So I think that's one unique aspect of the area.
Paul, what makes us unique?
I think we have a great ecosystem. I've noticed, especially the past 10 years and coming out of the pandemic and COVID, we have 1909 Foundation, South Florida Tech Hub. We have all these Miami-Dade Innovation Authority. We have all these groups that are here to harbor startups and give them an ecosystem to talk about the problems, the challenges that seem to work very well and attract talent here. We have FAU Tech Runway, Miami-Dade College. So there's a lot of initiative here. Emerge Americas is one of the largest conferences, tech conferences that we have in the Miami Beach Convention Center every year. Florida Venture Forum has a capital conference that takes place at the Lowe's Hotel in Coral Gables every year. So it really attracts a lot of energy and excitement into the area, into Florida.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I think we all would agree that Miami's startup ecosystem has experienced rapid expansion, especially over the last 5 years. Miami is a geographic natural bridge between North America, Latin America, Europe. I think some of the exciting facts, and you touched on them, is in 2024, that ecosystem has surged to be ranked 16th. And that's just where we've come in such a short period of time, I think is so impressive. What also is very interesting is it's expected that over the next 5 years, going into 2030, the annual venture capital investment is expected to reach 25 billion, and that's again every year. So while we've come such a long way, I think the best is still ahead. You ask why, why Miami? I think there's a lot of reasons. The favorable tax structure, I think, is bringing a lot of opportunities here that would otherwise be going to California and New York, as mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. And we've heard already this morning some macro, movements that are impacting us. We talked about shortage of housing, right? Rising housing, rising interest rates. While Florida is a very accommodating jurisdiction for business, especially South Florida, what are some of these macro, movements that are impacting, that you see impacting, South Florida in particular as being able to attract additional business? Go ahead, Zahir. Yeah.
Sorry. All right. I think we are rapidly improving some of the things that are really important to have a great ecosystem. So we're rapidly improving our healthcare system. So Baptist, we have a few other really big, Mount Sinai, we have a few different health campuses that are getting a lot of injection of funding, and so I think that's one great thing. I think with education is another area, because at the end of the day, people move not just for their businesses, but also where they're relocating their lives, their homes, their families. And so I think we need to make sure that we're always hitting up all of those areas, because if you don't have great healthcare, if you don't have great education, then you can have the greatest tax system in the world, you can have great views, but it just makes it difficult to raise kids and eventually have a family so you can actually stay here with your business. And so I think, we have some really big wins that way. University of Miami is rapidly improving and increasing. Just this past year, our entrepreneurship program is now ranked 16th in the nation, so which is obviously really great, because now we're going to have a lot of students matriculating into this. So I think we've got a decent pipeline of talent. I think we've got an improving healthcare system. I think we've got a great and improving education system as well. I will say, if there's one thing that I think gets a little tough is probably infrastructure. We have a lot of traffic. We don't have too many road improvements that are probably pretty necessary. And so I think that's one of the areas that if people have to critique, okay, what is one area we could probably improve? And with an improvement of infrastructure, then you can live a lot further out and be able to commute to wherever you need to. So that's probably, I guess I'd say, the pros and the cons in my view.
Paul, I usually view challenges also as opportunities, but what are some of the challenges that may be opportunities that you see that are impacting South Florida?
Well, the capital markets have been really tough over the last couple of years. We had 2021, which was this great year, and then we had higher interest rates, we have inflation, we have tariffs now, so there's a lot of uncertainty. But even through this, there's still a lot of VC firms that's moved to Florida, that's investing in Florida. I believe in Q4 of last year, there was $600 million of VC deals. Q1 was almost $900 million of VC deals throughout South Florida alone. So even though these uncertainties, we're in challenging times, there's still movement in Florida because we have the infrastructure, we have the great universities, the ecosystem, and there's more VCs that are located in Florida now than ever. So even though throughout this, there's funding, there's opportunities. If you have a great product, if you have a great company, it's a little bit more challenging where, you could get funding pre-revenue, you could get funding with an idea. You need to have, proof of concept, customer validation, some revenue always helps. Even though it's a little bit more challenging, Florida has the system set up and there's a lot of activity within this market because of the talent that's here, and people see Florida as an emerging market.
Thank you, Paul. Brian?
Yeah, I think we would all agree that South Florida, Miami particularly, has a very unique heartbeat from the rest of the nation. Miami continues to perform at a very high level, and I think that we've demonstrated our resilience in difficult times, which I think people take a lot of comfort in. The environment itself is shifting. Funding rounds are taking longer. You kind of have to show a clearer path to profitability sometimes to secure that investment, to raise that capital. I think in this current environment, macro, you're talking about everything that's going on with the global trade economy, tariffs. think companies to be able to show that they can find new supply chain opportunities, I think that's certainly critical. It's something that is certainly going to be a key to success, taking on new market initiatives. All of these things are just extremely important in the current environment. Companies need to be able to demonstrate that.
Thank you. I'll note that Miami, we talked about it's a transportation hub. So the cargo industry here is massive. The port is massive. The cruise port is the largest in the world. And so, while you mentioned, Paul, tariffs, we'll see how that plays out. That may have an impact on imports, but it may also give us opportunities for local manufacturing that, hasn't necessarily been, an industry that we've pursued. And that also requires, land. So that's going to be another issue for us to have to deal with. We all watch Billions, right? And we're familiar with crypto bros and that. What are some of these myths or misconceptions that are not really, that you don't really see in your real world here in Miami?
Okay. I see this a lot where I would say starting maybe 10 years ago or so, you could build a startup in Miami, but everyone felt, the entrepreneur always felt they had to leave. They had to go to California to get funding. They had to go to the Northeast to get funding, to get the talent. So we were really great at having an incubator to start the startups and the entrepreneurs, but they were leaving South Florida. That really changed the last 5 years with the amount of growth that's in Florida. And we have such a robust ecosystem where you can have the entrepreneur that they have the law firm that can help them. They have the accounting firms. They have all the professional service providers in Miami, in Fort Lauderdale, in West Palm Beach that can really help them and take them from an idea through an IPO process. So you no longer have to leave South Florida. Everything can be done locally.
Brian?
Yeah, so I'll try to stay on topic as the banker up here. I think when it comes to startups, you obviously think of SBA and SBA type programs. I think one of the big myths and misconceptions is that getting an SBA loan from one bank is the same as getting it from any other bank. And I certainly don't believe that's the case. While there are certain program requirements, eligibility that goes into the SBA program that are pretty standard, banks look at it very differently. You have some banks that only require 1 year of financial history. Other banks require 2. You have banks that say they have an appetite for SBA lending, but they're having just generalists that aren't really familiar with the process. And for anybody who has done or worked on an SBA loan, it is a very challenging process, and you really need to have that expertise and that process down. So I can tell you that at City National, and I believe at a handful of other banks, they have specialists that's all they do and that's all they work on to make sure that it's not a frustrating experience for a client. So I think that's certainly a myth and misconception.
Thank you, Brian. Another myth might be that lawyers wear ties and others don't. So Zahir, what's something that you see as a myth or a misconception?
I think there was this idea, even pre-COVID, where you move to a place and that's where you build your company, that's where your employees are based and whatnot. And I think one thing that I'm starting to realize, so I'm in YPO here, and a lot of my fellow chapter members, they run businesses from all over the world. And so I was shocked to see how much travel there is to different states, to different countries on almost a weekly basis. And I thought that was a pretty interesting transient thing that I guess I never really thought about or realized, that it's not like we have these homes or offices that are always going to be flooded with companies. Sure, we have those, but I think there's a lot of people that are able to run companies remotely and manage them remotely, and I think it's a very interesting dynamic because it ends up being able to bring money from all over, whether that's Latin America, whether that's other states or whatnot. And so I think it's a new model for how people are starting to run businesses.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder for the next question. I went to Florida International University for undergrad, and then I went to UM for law school. I serve on the President's Council at FIU, and I'm a member of the board of Ultimate Medical Academy, which is a not-for-profit medical education institution that serves underserved and underprivileged communities to get a job in healthcare, doing different types of healthcare jobs. I look at FIU. It's one of the largest universities in the country, one of the largest universities in terms of graduating minorities, both at bachelor's, master's, and doctorates. Miami-Dade Community College is one of the largest community colleges, in the country, graduating thousands of graduates every year. And UM is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year, which is pretty exciting. So how do you see universities, UM in particular, or other universities locally, supporting entrepreneurship, fostering an environment for that, and helping drive the community forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I was largely brought over to University of Miami to really focus on how do we make entrepreneurship a lot more realistic and a lot more experiential. We're not all going to start companies in undergrad and run with them after, but can we at least start building that muscle memory so you actually know how to do it? And so, one of the initiatives we're working on is a thing called Startup Lab, where what used to be, a theory of entrepreneurship intro class followed by some case studies based on scaling new ventures, we're now changing those two courses into a year-long program where you actually start a company and launch it. Right now we're leveraging AI to the max because we have very little time in order to be able to do this. But nonetheless, students are actually now moving away from business plans and business model canvases to how do you make really cohesive, consistent pitches, and then how do you actually start an actual company and start working with all the legal structures, but actually building growth marketing and whatnot. And so I think this shift into a much more experiential education, which is now actually achievable thanks to AI and other technology, is really, really driving at least University of Miami. And so that's where a lot of our initiatives are going.
Thank you. Not speaking about myself, of course, but I know how important a professional service provider is to businesses, lawyers, accountants, bankers, and so forth. So, one of the issues with business is being adaptable. And then, we've heard earlier today how rapidly change is coming, and most of it's really precipitated by technology. Paul, why don't you give us a little bit of background on what you're seeing businesses are doing and how their ability to pivot and adapt to a changing environment is essential to continue to be successful?
Yeah, I really see it every day within my practice. When you're on that road as a startup, you're constantly pivoting. It's never going to be, I have this great idea, steps, 1, 2, 3 are going to happen, I'm going to get funding. Never happens. We have companies, Netflix started as a DVD rental company, then they pivoted to streaming, and now they're pivoting into content creation. Slack was a failed gaming company, and those were big pivots that ended up being successful. So generally, when we work with clients, we have an outsourced accounting department, and maybe the entrepreneur has their first round of funding, and they're looking for the next goal might be 18 months. So we're constantly working with them on forecasting. How do you get to your goal within this time period? What do you have to pivot? How do you have to change? Because you really don't want to go back after you have a funding round, go back to your initial investors and say, well, I need more money to reach the goal that I was supposed to reach with the money you already gave me. You don't want to have that conversation. So we're constantly working with our startups and really seeing, okay, here's month 1, 2, and 3, and this isn't working. Maybe we should pivot for the talent acquisition. Maybe there's more capital expenditures that need to be purchased. So we're constantly working, going to board meetings, talking with the investors to stay on top of their goals and not having that awkward conversation with the VC or the investor that, hey, we didn't meet our goal, we want to be ahead of that.
That's an excellent segue for the next question for Brian. We represent a lot of foreign investors who are looking to deploy capital here in South Florida, a lot of investees who are looking for capital, a lot of lenders and borrowers. How does access to capital or lack thereof really impact a business? You already mentioned the SBA loans. I think the government and local governments are also an important source of funding for grants and whatnot. But what are you seeing in the private banking industry?
Yeah, so I think it's important to be working with a bank that truly takes the time to understand a business. I think that just as important as selecting the right bank is finding a banking relationship with a banker. I think so many clients are working with banks, and we run into it all the time as we go out and meet these people. They've been at a bank 10 years and they have no idea who their banker is. And to have somebody that really understands your business in the early stages when you're looking to scale for growth, that can be behind the scenes at the bank advocating for you, I just think is extremely critical to that aspect of of securing capital, banking solutions, even if it's not lending, all aspects of the banking relationship.
Especially in this environment where the capital markets are so tight, you really have to have that banking relationship. It's more important than ever.
And you think so many people do not. We come across it daily, so.
Yeah, another thing I see a lot in my practice is also, you know, how do you deal with successive generations of successful, you know, families and businesses, and how do we educate them to perpetuate the success that they've had, you know, as a family, right? And so, you know, going forward and looking just towards the future, where do you see are, you know, some places that Miami really needs to focus on over the next decade? You heard some of the answers from the prior panel on this topic, and I think it's a very difficult thing to get in your time machine and see what Miami's going to look like in 10 years. But you mentioned, you mentioned transportation. You know, one thing I've seen as somebody who's born and raised here in South Florida is that the center of South Florida was downtown Miami, right? And then it shifted a little bit to Brickell, and now it shifted a little bit further west. And now if you get in your car and, you know, you drive to Doral, you drive to Kendall, you're seeing, you know, something like I like to call the Manhattanization of South Florida, right? Where you're seeing all these like little communities grow up. And, you know, if somebody who lived in Doral, you know, isn't going to commute to downtown anymore, right? They're going to stay in their neighborhood, and there's plenty of jobs and opportunities there. But what are some of the other challenges you see, you know, for South Florida over the next, if you got in your time machine and you landed in 2020, 35, what are you seeing? Zahir?
I really do hope we improve our airport. I think it's like the worst in the world, and I've landed in a lot of airports in terrible countries. So I do think we do have to understand that we are going to be a big transportation hub, and we need to make sure we invest in that. You know, obviously climate change and rising sea water. I think we just did a really cool study that shows where all the groundwater is, so we can start doing a better job protecting communities and whatnot. So, you know, I hope that in 10 years we've really started nailing down both transportation plus just safety of neighborhoods, infrastructure, and the airport.
Noted.
Yeah. You know, we talked about transportation. Affordable housing is always a big issue here. Good schools, the universities do a good job, and I would love to see them continue to innovate and continue the programs that we discussed earlier. And I really think just in South Florida in general, the universities do a really good job of empowering the students and the faculty to really innovate. So I'd like to see that continue in more public and private partnerships as well to kind of support our incubator. A lot of times the government can lay the seeds to really have tax incentives and kind of build it up, but it's really the private partnership that's going to take it to the next level to expand on it.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add. I think my fellow panelists hit the two. Infrastructure modernization, I mean, we all experience it every day, and you're right. Nobody wants to go from Doral to downtown. It's a nightmare. We see the improvements that are being made. I think that's partially what's causing the problem, and it's certainly very frustrating, but it's so necessary because these aren't, you know, 6-month projects. These things are taking 3, 4, 5 years to complete. So infrastructure modernization, and then as was just mentioned, I think affordable and workforce housing, we see what's gone on with real estate prices, and if we don't start putting those in place now, 10 years from now, it's going to be impossible to do that. So it's certainly got to be a focus that we're working on today.
Yeah, and I think climate change is a good point. We haven't heard much about that today, but you know, Miami's nestled between two treasures, which is the Everglades and Biscayne Bay. And so there isn't a lot of room to expand, except you have to go up, right? And you know, we've seen a lot of studies about climate change, rising sea levels, and I think that's something that, you know, Miami's going to have to really confront over the next decade. And that, you know, I mentioned earlier the challenges present opportunities, and I think that's one of the opportunities that we have. We could become the epicenter for the world in terms of how to deal with climate change and sea level rise and whatnot, and I think that's something that we're going to be seeing a lot of and talking a lot about over the next decade. Speaking of which, and I already segued this, but what do you think, you know, Miami is really going to be well positioned to do over that next decade? You know, where do you think we're really going to be thought leaders and business leaders?
Yeah, I think our, speaking from University of Miami, I think our universities are really, really, really stepping up to the ecosystem that they're finding themselves a part of. And so I think we're going to start matriculating a ton of really strong talent. And I think we're going to be able to offer a lot more applicable courses, whether that's in real estate and family offices, whatever it may be, that I think a lot of professionals, not just students going through these institutions, will be able to benefit from. And so I'm really looking forward to the role that FIU, Miami-Dade, all the educational institutions that are here are going to start playing, because I think if you look at it compared to other big cities that we would compete with, I don't think they've been as strong as they could be relatively, and so I'm excited for where all of those are heading.
I've noticed going to Emerge America's Florida Venture Forum Capital, aerospace is a huge industry that's coming to Florida. We have the Space Coast. We have the big companies such as Boeing, Blue Origin that are already there. But there's a ton of startups that are going to the Space Coast. We have the Lone Star Holdings, there's Skycatcher, there's all these really cool companies. But there's also a related industry to build that up that's coming to Miami. I've seen more startups that are supporting the aerospace community coming to Miami to have the engineers, building the software, building some of the hardware. So that's really interesting. We're not going to be launching rockets out of Brickell Bay, hopefully, so that can stay on the Space Coast, but we support it there, and that's really the future, especially for Florida, because that's where the governor's investing the money, that's where the companies are coming, and that's, in 10 years, who knows, we're going to be sending people to the moon, coming back all the time, hopefully. It's only continuing to evolve.
Thank you, Paul. Brian?
From a banking side, I think Miami is known as being the gateway to international capital. There are over 60 international banks operating here in Miami. I mean, that's significant. As far as industries go, with having one of the largest seaports here in Miami, having the busiest international cargo airport here, these are assets that I think position us for a lot of unique industries, international trade services, advanced logistics, supply chain technology, to name a few, I think are going to continue to grow and have grown because of those assets.
Okay, thank you. And so to close out today's panels, I'll ask the same question that was asked before, and maybe in 40 sentences or less. No. How would you describe Miami's growth over the past decade? Like I said, in maybe one sentence or two. And how do you see us moving forward?
I think we are ever increasing our diversity, not just ethnically or whatnot, but just in terms of industries, in terms of interests, in terms of people that are coming here. And I think we're going to be able to leverage it incredibly well. I don't think there's another city that has this level of diversity of thought, experience, and culture. And so I'm really excited for where we're going.
Yeah, I think the talent pool is just going to continue to grow here. And really, it's just not tourism anymore. It's innovation. That's how I look at it.
I'll take the line, the best is yet to come. I think we should all be very proud of everything that Miami has accomplished, being and recognized as one of the top markets in the country. So everything that we've done, but very excited about where we're headed.
Thank you, Zahir. Again, thank you, Paul, Brian. Thank you very much for participating. Abby, thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you, Francis.